mechanisms to influence violence and make the violence come out in the interests of your own allies. No, the whole way of thinking needs to go. I mean, this was brought to my mind when I was trying to mediate on the Syria crisis when it first blew up. I finally got through after 6 months trying to the man in charge of the Syria Foreign Office desk. I said, look, I'm a mediator specialising in interfaith mediation. I can solve this Syria crisis with your help. Let's do a mediation. He said, what? Hang on. It's not our policy to make peace in Syria. It's our policy to bring down the Assad regime. He said this over the phone, right? This is the head of Syria policy at the Foreign Office. And I was utterly shocked and appalled. But that's how they think. This law, this bill, would end that. It would shift foreign policy of the UK towards peacemaking. And we used to be quite good at this. That's why we managed to, get along in India for 3 centuries. Because we were respected, we were known as for the veracity of our word, we were faithful servants of everybody, regardless of what religion or whatever you were, and our trading deals were genuine and we didn't lie. So that's what I'm suggesting. We have a peacemaking emphasis. And that for the United Nations, we should help, because we're a member of the Security Council, we can do this, working with Russia and America and other powers, to bring into being a UN intranational mediation service. You see, the UN was designed for conflict resolution between nation states when they go to war. On the whole, it's been reasonably successful at that. It stopped World War III, touch wood. What it's totally useless at is solving civil wars which break out within nations, like Cyprus, like Syria, like the Congo, like Nigeria, like you name it, like Ukraine. It needs, therefore, a special new body, and I'm sure Antonio Guterres, the new General Secretary, would be delighted if British officials went to New York and said, we want to help you set this up. Here's the funding. Because it would totally transform the way the UN operates around the world. If it had an intranational mediation service, it would address, in a subtle, delicate, nuanced way, these disputes within nation states. Because the tragedy for the UN is these are nations that are members of the UN, and yet they themselves are falling apart, and each claiming to be the real nation. Well, the UN International Mediation Service would then kick in, and Britain could pioneer this. We could help with that. Also, by setting up education aid with UNESCO, instead of leaving UNESCO like the kind of dinosaurs of Netanyahu and his cronies want to do, and America seems to trot everywhere that Netanyahu, throws a bone. Well, no, sorry, we like UNESCO. We helped set it up. It was a Welshman, Gwilym Davies, who founded the Welsh Youth for Peace message every year, who helped write the constitution for UNESCO, and it first met in London, in the great Methodist Central Hall opposite Westminster Abbey. I love UNESCO. I've been there. I've spoken there. We need to help it fund a new thing called Education Aid. Every year, the same day every year, I suggest St David's Day, 1st of March. Every day throughout the year, on the 1st of March, all kids in schools have a day off. So they're going to love this. They can wear a non-uniform day, go into school, and they do events which are fundraising events. They read poems, they do plays, they have sports running races, they bake a cake in the cookery class, they read Plato and Daffon's philosophy classes. But they're all sponsored, so they've gone round their mates and their families and parents' friends, and they've got, 5p a minute, I'll sponsor your Plato reading or whatever. They're raising money. And this is happening throughout the entire world on the same day. It's filmed. And it's happening at universities as well. So you have, like in Live Aid, that's the model. It was Bob Geldof getting an honorary degree at the University of London that gave him the idea. So, and I've written to Bob about it. He could be involved. So at Harvard University or Oxford University, you have, white tie events, posh dinners with all the former politicians who went to Oxford or Harvard or whatever coming and giving speeches, and you could charge people, I don't know, $10,000 to come to those events, because it would be very prestigious, and you get a little plate to take home that you were there. Well, all the money raised, be it at prestigious institutions like Oxford or Harvard or your local village school in Botswana or wherever, a third of all the money raised would stay in the institution. So they have an incentive to do it. Another third would go into a national fund, which would be shared out under the Ministry of Education for parts of the education world in that country that are most needy, to buy all educational things like books, hiring teachers, decorating schools, building new schools, whatever. And the final third of the amount raised would go into an international pot, which would then go to regions and parts of the world which are really, really struggling to afford basic educational facilities. And and then private organisations or initiatives, teaching bodies, subject research bodies even, could then apply for funding from that international pot, and indeed from the national pot. And so things like peace education and specialised interfaith peace education could also apply for funding from the education aid budget. Anyway, that's the plan, that's the project, and I'm proposing it be adopted by the Bremain Alliance. It's such an obvious idea. Everyone I discuss it with says, why hasn't it been done years ago? Well, let's do it. Now's the time. Put it on the manifesto. Tell people on the doorstep. That's what this liberal Bremain Progressive Alliance wants, and Labour, and these are ideas that were nurtured when I was working with Dr. Jagdish Gundara, who was Professor of Multicultural Education at the Institute of Education. He was a UNESCO chair at the Institute, and I've seen from within, education is the only resource that can help solve these world's problems, and yet it's always underfunded. So let's have one day a year when Education Aid Day happens, and everyone can get involved. Contact me. Let's do it. And okay, so the next item, this is, again, you might think controversial, but it's got to be there in my opinion. Number 25 is the legalisation of soft recreational drugs. Will end the criminalisation of millions of people and enable the medical and social benefits of their judicious use to benefit the Treasury, as in the Canadian model brought in by the Canadian Liberal Party of Justin Trudeau. This will bring millions of pounds to the Exchequer through taxes and stimulate a legal cannabis industry in the UK. Cannabis and other such plants would be available for sale in special shops nationwide to over 18-year-olds with their contents and quality carefully monitored for excellence, but would come with due health warnings, just as alcohol and tobacco do, and not be sold to minors. Intelligent drugs education programs would give the people the knowledge on which to base lifestyle choices, and proper help would be given for all addiction or mental health problems. The war on drugs would be ended and peace declared instead. Parliament to play the Beatles song All You Need Is Love on its loudspeakers on day one of the Bremain Reform Alliance taking office. Ha! That's a little jokey bit I stuck in there, but seriously, the point is that this war on drugs is completely ridiculous. It was dreamed up by the Nixon hard right in America. It was bought into by the hard right in Britain, and to some extent the sort of left Puritans. It's interesting. I've been reading a book about the Beatles called Revolution in the Head by Ian MacDonald, about the cultural liberation that the Beatles' music caused, and drugs were part of that in the 60s and 70s, Bob Dylan and that whole thing. This was a liberal awakening in the world, and when Harold Wilson was elected in 1963, it was part of that revolution in the mind, so to say. And I remember that, as a boy. So it is Liberal policy to legalise soft drugs. It's in the manifesto of the Liberal and Democratic Party. And it's been done in Canada and in some other countries. And it's it's of benefit to the community because, like in Colorado and other American states, it brings in a lot of extra cash to build, schools and repair roads and bridges and so on. And it would be such common sense. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm saying that, all drug taking is great and let's all just have a sort of, let's all be stoned all the time. No, on the contrary, I'm saying if you legalise it and you take away the attraction of it being illegal, which gives it a sort of buzz, then people will gravitate to what they want. I have friends that smoke huge amounts of cannabis, and I don't know how they do it. I just couldn't possibly contemplate that. It works for them, it's their lifestyle choice. I don't think they should go to prison for that. I have other friends that would never ever touch, any kind of drug, apart from tea, coffee, alcohol and so on, perhaps. I think we're all on a spectrum here. The Liberal position is it should be allowed up to the individual to decide where they want to be on the spectrum, within reason, obviously, and not to be fed false and scary information that disallows their ability to make up their own minds. I think there is an argument that even psychedelics, things like ayahuasca and so on, should be available on license in special ways for people that want to explore these things. I don't think these things should be criminal. Consciousness exploration is not criminal, it's a right of human beings. And in the Druid community, if you look at the stories of Taliesin and Finn McCool, the Celts, the Druids, were using psychedelics for consciousness exploration. So when Timothy Leary, the great Irish psychologist, said, "Hey guys, let's all try acid," he was just being true to his Druid roots, actually. It's a human right to have that moment of omniscience that Taliesin got, and that Adam and Eve got in the Garden of Eden. It's the same story. And that is the revolution in the head, as Ian MacDonald puts it, that was represented by the 60s. Now, I think the liberal tradition, which I represent and stand for, the liberal, left, social, conscious, green tradition, needs to stand up and take, and campaign for that freedom, that liberty. That was what the Romantic poets of the 19th century were doing. That's what Byron and the others were doing. And that's my tradition. It's the right to know, the right to find out, the right to experience. The other tradition is, no, lock them away, stick them in jail, suppress them, etc. That's the Tory tradition. I'm sorry, I'm on the other side here. And that's why I'm suggesting we play the Beatles' All You Need Is Love in Parliament when the Bremain Alliance takes power. I hope you like my sense of humour, but I'm deadly serious here. I'd love to see that happen. Number 26, the people of Northern Ireland would be asked again at a second referendum. Because don't forget, they voted to remain in the European Union, right? The people of Northern Ireland will be asked to vote as part of that overall second referendum for the UK if they, A, want to leave the European Union as part of the entire UK, or if they wish to stay in the European Union as part of the UK, or if they wish to stay in the European Union but as part of the Irish Republic. This is a three-way referendum that would be unique to the people of Northern Ireland and would be held at the same time as the overall UK referendum on the EU. And I think you can't vote for two options. I think you'd have to have one of the three. Northern Ireland's a very special case, and one of the things I feel so bitterly disappointed about the Brexit lobby is their ignorance about Northern Ireland. I've got partly Irish blood. I've spent time in Ireland, probably in former lives, many lifetimes. I love Ireland. I love the north and the south. I love all the Irish people. They're amazing. They don't want to go back to the time of Troubles. And Brexit, in the way that it's been served up by Boris Johnson and his madmen, is going to do that. We're going to be back to the Miami Street Showbound massacre type catastrophes, as I've shared before in the previous talk. So no, just give them another referendum. I don't know what they'd vote for. I imagine it would be interesting to see anyway. But they have to have a right to a second referendum. I believe they will again reaffirm their wish to stay in the European Union. And this time it must be respected. Even if other parts of the UK say, no, we still want to leave, and the Northern Ireland people say they want to stay in the EU, it must be accommodated. Number 27. The workings of the Privy Council would also be televised and recorded as in Hansard, and subject to freedom of information legislation, and would also be subject to the Parliamentary Duty of Veracity Bill. Lying would lead to instant dismissal of any member of the Privy Council, up to and including the monarch. Well, you know, I really feel passionate about this because I've been watching in horror as the Privy Council has been sort of rolled out of the cupboard as now the de facto government of the country. With the prorogation of Parliament, the Privy Council was acting as if it can just run the country and just stop Parliament. And it's done so successfully, really. Well, that's not on, is it? I mean, I wrote to the Speaker and I pointed out what had happened. It was a constitutional nightmare. And he kind of wrote back, but now he's gone. He's been forced out by these same powers, you see. And the Privy Council just goes on. It meets in secret. None of its minutes are recorded. Nothing that's ever said there can be accessed by people like you and me. It's a secret cabal who are running the country effectively. And I'm saying that's not enough. If we want to be a democracy, as I believe we do, and as the Liberal Democrat Party, the second part of that name, Democrat, explains where we're coming from, we need to make the Privy Council amenable to rational analysis. Because it seems to me that some of its statements and some of its policies have been very, very dubious, to put it mildly. The Privy Council will be used by Theresa May to justify attacking civil scientific institutions in Syria, for instance, alleging that Syria had done attacks on its own citizens. Now, that evidence was never shown to the British people nor to parliamentarians. It was only shown to the Privy Council. And all we have is the word of the Prime Minister reporting. Well, I'm sorry, Theresa May's word is like written on water, as far as I'm concerned. Worthless. We will only ever get control and knowledge flowing through Parliament on which to make genuine decisions if that elite stranglehold the Privy Council has on information, particularly intelligence information, is opened up for public analysis and discourse. So the only way to do that is make the Privy Council meetings subject to normal television recordings as in Parliament, and people speak on the record, their comments are noted, and if a Privy Council gets up and says X, Y, Z, well, that's their statement, they stand by it. If it turns out to be not true, if they deliberately lie in the Privy Council, they are sacked. The whole point of the Privy Council is supposed to be the innermost sanctum where the monarch has her closest friends and advisors, and if they're lying, it's scandalous. Well, I think they are lying. We know Boris Johnson was lying. And we don't know who else is lying in there. But my hunch is that, that there are people lying in the Privy Council. And this proposal, which would be legislated in Parliament, which is the sovereign body of our Constitution, and has the right, therefore, to legislate this, and indeed the duty to legislate it, would then supersede that lying, cabal, whoever in the Privy Council thinks lying is a good idea. And I'm sorry, but I've said up to and including the monarch because, God forbid, I haven't met the Queen to chat to, but I have been in her presence a few times. I believe she's a woman of veracity. and I can't believe any circumstances where she would lie, but maybe some other monarch might be in power, or I don't know, maybe on a bad day these monarchs think they can lie and get away with it. Well, then I don't think they should be our monarch anymore. If monarchs lie, that trust between subject, citizen and monarch goes. So I'm sorry, it has to include the monarch. They have to tell the truth for us to believe them. And to pledge our allegiance and loyalty and all that. That's how a proper government works. Okay, and then moving on to 28. There's a kind of, you can see they're growing in crescendo here. We're coming to the end of the symphony. This should be put to music, by the way. We need Schumann or someone to write the symphony. The written constitution would include a new definition of treason, encompassing not only acts injurious to the well-being of the monarch, but also acts injurious to the well-being of the people of the UK as a whole. Genuine lawful democratic independence movements such as the SNP would be excluded from this bill. The Supreme Court would have responsibility for cases of treason brought under this Act, and the Supreme Court would also act as the constitutional court of the UK, henceforth, for all disputes concerning interpretation of the new written constitution. Well, that's an important one, and I feel passionate about this, because to me, Brexit is like treason. It is a policy almost seemingly deliberately designed to destroy the UK, or to hammer home its self-destruction. And people pushing for it, possibly in the collusion and pay of foreign powers, who've been humping away at this, like America, seem to me to be committing treason. Now, we need, therefore, a new definition of what treason is. To me, treason should not be just, I'm doing acts injurious to the monarch. No, it should be to the country and to the people of the country. And so we need to rethink the wording of this, because the Treason Act that's on in action at the moment is a 1300s Act for the English monarch, at a time when, the king was the fulcrum of everything, and if you threatened him, it was like terrible. Well, now it's more subtle and complex, and we have people that are threatening the people. So this needs to be reflected. And but this would exclude things like the SNP, because they just want freedom for their own country, Scotland. So that's not treason. That's an independence movement, which is different. So this would need to be gone into very carefully by constitutional lawyers and so on. But when that written constitution is produced, the definition of treason needs updating. There is also then a very odd possibility, which is, what do you do if you get a monarch who's actually committing treason against their own people? I mean, God forbid it would ever happen, but imagine that some crazy monarch got into power who was in collusion with a foreign country like the USA or wherever, given loads of secret money, to then pass legislation that was totally against the wishes and will of those people. Well, that's treason by the monarch against the people, making secret deals. I don't know, let's say this crazy monarch was bought by China. We'll give you £100 billion and an island off China if you do Brexit. Yes, well, that's treason against the British people by the monarch in collusion with a foreign power. So that would be covered in this legislation. We don't like monarchs that commit treason against their own people. So what I'm saying is the definition of treason works both ways. You can commit treason as a monarch just as much you can as a person. And this is, therefore that aspect of the constitutional law needs updating. And there are examples, for instance, in I think something that really annoyed people in times past was the Treaty of Dover, when it was found that the British monarch was in collusion with France, passing a secret treaty without telling Parliament or the people. And that, that led ultimately to the Glorious Revolution, where monarchs weren't allowed to do that kind of thing. So I'm just saying, okay, but treason needs updating. Finally, the last one, you'll be saying, hooray, it's the end. Well, you know, it's the end of the beginning, my friends. The last one is one that I feel really passionate about. I feel passionate about all these, and they're all designed, like I'm a medical doctor diagnosing the body politic of my country. Think of me as Thomas Hobbes in Exile in Paris, with Leviathan on the table. Leviathan is sick. The body politic of my beloved Britain is in trouble. It's almost like a civil war been going on for 3 years. I think I know what will cure it. I'm Dr. Hobbes saying, these are the 29 things. Telling the truth, new definition of treason, written constitution. And this last one, this is about the spiritual health of our land. You see, all over the country, people are a bit lost. They don't have any spiritual guidance. They hate learning RE in schools. It's trivialised and marginalised. So we live in a post-faith society. And our abbeys and beautiful monasteries that used to exist are complete ruined, just shells, right? So what I'm suggesting in number 29, the last one, is the icing on the cake, really, for anyone that's awake. The ancient monasteries and abbeys of the UK, which were destroyed previously and are now in a ruinous state, would be restored as spiritual retreat centres, run loosely and conscientiously by the Church of England, Church of Scotland, Church of Wales, Church of Ireland, on behalf of the well-being of all the people of the UK, and set up as ecumenical, open retreat centres for spiritual pilgrims throughout the UK. Young unemployed people would learn craft skills to rebuild these monasteries throughout the land, taking pride in their work, and would learn architects and skilled craftsmen would all be invited to play a role in rebuilding such sacred places as Glastonbury, Rievaulx, Lewes Priory, Abbey Cumhere, Reading, and so on and so on. Each restored spiritual pilgrimage centre would have a library, a scriptoria, a bookshop, a healing clinic, herbal garden, dormitory, refectory, chapter house, prayer chapel and meditation spaces, and would be open to Christians of all denominations and also to people of all other faiths to come on retreat and stay and help with tasks on a voluntary basis. Daily prayers for peace and healing would form the core of their renewed mission in the life of the nation. Okay, so why is this important to finish with? Well, I think Brexit is not only a failure of our intellectual advancement as a nation, not only a failure of our scientific expertise, it's also a failure of our spiritual health as a nation. We've become less caring, less compassionate. It's about egotism and selfishness. It's about saying, we're Brits, we're better than Europe, we're going our own way. It's hubris. The opposite of hubris is humility, and that was what Christianity was supposed to teach. You know, Nero was a very clever man, genius, polymath, great musician, clever chap. He wanted to create a new religion with him as a god, etc., etc. But he was vicious, mean, violent, sneaky, and depraved. And he killed St. Peter and Paul and unleashed the fire of Rome to blame the Christians. Typical Nero. What I'm saying is that Christ was the opposite to that. He was about humility, genuine love, genuine spiritual love, agape, genuine caring, and genuine education, so moral education. We don't have enough places where that can be done, and I'm saying let's rebuild our beautiful ancient monasteries like Glastonbury. People are still drawn to them as tourists, but I would like them to be open, like Llanthony Priory in Wales, one of my favourite. You know, instead of just like going and marvelling at these buildings, let's rebuild them. And that would give work to lots of unemployed kids, youngsters, like in Iona. The Iona Abbey was more or less rebuilt by the poor people of Glasgow under the great leadership of the chap that got the whole thing going, and it's still functioning and flourishing. Well, I'd like to see all our abbeys and monasteries throughout Britain become like Iona, refurbished as centres of learning, centres of spirituality, centres of prayer. You wouldn't have to be Christian to go there. You could be whatever you are. Just go as you are, you know. and enjoy being there. It would give a place for homeless people to be. They could become gardeners in the monastic garden. They could end up becoming a scholar and translating some ancient works of Bede or something. You know, we have a whole ancient wisdom tradition in Britain. People like St Dunstan, who was a great abbot of Glastonbury. These were great sages, and we're in danger of forgetting them and losing them. And I'm saying, no, let's bring them back. Let's rebirth them. But do it in a new way. So not going right back to the old medieval, down on our knees, hair shirts, you know, flagellate like in, you know, Holy Blood and Holy Grail stuff. The weird end of that, you know, Catholic stuff. No, let's do it in a new, reformed, outward-looking, ecumenical, spiritually advanced, Teilhard de Chardin kind of way of these places could be scientific research centres as well, which is what the old monasteries were in their original time. They could be labs where people are studying the stars and trying to reconcile ancient wisdom with modern science. So I'm saying, anyway, retreat centres all over the land. And then, yeah, our European citizen friends could come and visit, and we can go and visit theirs. I have to say, living in France, it's just so wonderful with so many spiritual sanctuaries around. And I'd love this to be done all over Europe, but let's do it in the UK first, eh? And by the way, the European Union has just made available millions of euros of funds for monasteries and spiritual retreat centres throughout Europe. So they might even give us some funding for this. Okay, and there we are. That's it. That's the last one. That last one is about the spiritual fabric of the nation and our infrastructure. So those are my 29 prescriptions as a doctor of healing for the health of our nation and the ending of Brexit. And I'm proposing the Remain Alliance, which is beginning to take shape, might want to adopt all or at least some of these. And if you've enjoyed listening to this talk, then share it. Spread the word among people that are determined to stop Brexit. I think we should do more than just stop Brexit. We should affirm Remain, but up the game so that we go for gold, so to speak, and make this a really wonderful election so we can all have a great Christmas and celebrate the destruction of this ridiculous Tory destructivism that's going on, and see Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings and so on, you know, in prison, in fact, I think, for their crimes. Okay, I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much for listening, and yeah, may the best man win in the coming elections. But I'll see you again before then. Thank you.